Hello, everyone. So Linda is back, Namani is back, and the sound is back, which is most interesting. So I'll cut the cheese very short, and I'll introduce the two speakers very quickly. But after having said just a couple of words on these sessions and the following one, it's the two events are, or the two conversation are really wanting to stop for a second, and rethink, or allow a little space of conversation to rethink this whole idea of design that we're taking from different many scales and places and practice to really reflect on the many forms. And in order to do so, we had invited two scholars, two friends, two colleagues that have done work in a different one scholars and researcher, and another one that was an alumni of the course. So the idea is to put them into conversation and openly having a conversation with you all. The logistics is very simple. We gave a little bit of space to each of them to present some of their work, the current preoccupation, and their own somehow taken on the two issues, the two topics that we have devised. The first one, so the one of today, was broadly titled as Crisis, Design and Criticality, Thinking Across Frictions and Ecologies of Climate Crisis. So what is at the center is the idea of crises, somehow, plural and multiple, and try to locate them and connect with the work of both Linda and Amani. So the idea is for them to speak about 45 minutes or so, and then one following the other, and then literally having you the time and the space to engage with them in a conversation across any aspects of their work and your preoccupation. So very quickly, I'm introducing the speakers. So Linda Schilling Cuellar is an architect from Chile with a master's degree in urban design from Columbia University, the Graduate School of Architecture, Planning and Preservation. And she's currently doing a PhD at the Center for Research in Architecture in Goldsmith. So she's in London with a research on landscape ledger that review an environmental impact assessment and the way of seeing and sensing land. The work of Linda as an academic and a co-founder of an office work with Claudio Astudillo, Ahora, focuses on post-extractive landscapes characteristics of the geological epoch in which we live. She recently exhibited with Ahora with the Problemas Húmidos, which is a public program series organized by the Battle Booth of Porto Design Biennale. And she works as an academic at the Universidad Las Americas, and she has been working across different schools and platforms of design. Hamani Al-Shaban, the other side, she's a Jordanian architect who graduated in BUD in 2019. With different years of working with professional experience in development planning across and within organizational grassroots, international NGOs, and different donor agency. She has both a background in humanitarian and development work and works in regions as Jordan, Nepal, Syria, Yemen, Iraq, and lately in Ukraine. So Amani is an urban practitioner that have always been profoundly interested in the issue of design, crisis, and community-based development. So I'm very pleased that despite being a little late, you have accepted to stay with us. So I'll disappear myself, and I leave the voices to Linda first, Amani second, and then opening the conversation. So you guys keep the questions and the conversation for feel for a little bit. And if there is anything on sounds and technical issue, just let me know. I know that there are people connected online, so if there is anything, please use the chat to communicate, and I'm trying to be attentive to that. Linda, thank you very much, and the floors and the screen is yours.
Thank you, Camilo. Thank you, Joanna, for the invitation. I'll start sharing my screen. You guys let me know if you can see it. Can you? Yes.
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. Okay. So, as Camilo was mentioning, I'm gonna, like, this whole presentation is about where I'm at right now as a scholar, as a practitioner, as an architect, and how I got here. So you guys can get a sense of how one starts talking about something called landscape ledgers coming from architecture. So my research focuses on the commodification of nature through environmental policy protocols. My research proposal, Landscape Ledgers, examines visual regimes present in environmental impact assessments that treat the environment in a transactional manner, without considering the relational nature of the ecosystem components in which it intervenes, and explores through this critique the possibility in citizen participation processes, which are by law required by AIAs, for the emergence of what Sheila Sheikh coins environmental publics, and active human and non-human witnesses of environmental degradation in development. So this is where I am right now, and with my journey as a trained architect. But it began here in Valparaiso, Chile. I'm from South America. If you sense my accent, it's because I speak Spanish. I studied my undergraduate degree in architecture at Universidad Técnica Santa Maria. This school in the early 2000s welcomed the computational design turn and was thinking through software like Alias Studio Tools, Maya, and all the Macromedia suite that later became Adobe. A school that merged theory seminars with design studio had us reading Deleuze while composing a timeline on Flash, the precursor to what we now call Adobe After Effects. And by the time I graduated, this was the architectural landscape. The Chilean golden age of architects led by the likes of Alejandro Aravena and his office Elemental, or Smilian Radich, Matthias Klotz. I think it takes a while to load. Sebastián Irarrázaval. And amongst all those men, one woman, Cecilia Puga. These were and are the architects featured in architectural magazines, the ones that got monographs for their work published and showcased to the world. The ones with projects that seem to exist in another Chile. One of heroic engineering and dramatic ocean cliffs. On the other hand, in the world of common people, a collective unrest or unease was best captured by Pedro Lemebel, a queer writer. In an open letter to Sebastián Piñera, the then soon-to-be president of Chile in 2009, he said, "How can there be people so belly full of landscape? That gluttony of having so much seems obscene to me." This critique always resonated with me, and so after working for 6 years, I studied a master's in urban design, as Camilo mentioned, at Columbia University, and that place informed a new worldview of how my practice needs to engage with environmental issues. That architects should claim a space in discussions which I thought were not our concern, and which I was taught was not my concern. And that landscape is co-produced between local economic practices and the environment that sustains it. So as Camilo was mentioning at the beginning, after 6 years, after my undergraduate degree, I decided to stop for a second, and I was like privileged enough to stop for a second and pursue a master's degree. And after my master's degree, after graduating from that program, I worked at the Center for Resilient Cities and Landscapes, a new center at Columbia University that partnered with the Rockefeller Foundation, 100 Resilient Cities initiative, to work with local governments within their Resilient Cities network and conduct workshops that they called accelerators. These accelerators consisted in discussions, subject matter expert presentations, and design charrettes that helped discuss urban design projects and see them in a new light. Many of the projects fostered a top-down approach and replicated the same mistakes of decades past, many of which consisted in replicating the same design principles from different continents, like mostly European continents, and project them onto places like South America and India without considering climate projections. I happened to engage in 3 projects that took place in Santiago de los Caballeros in the Dominican Republic, Pune in India, and the one featured in the image is it's a workshop that we ran in Montevideo in Uruguay. So after working at the center, I returned to Chile, and almost 10 years later, the images that were associated with the Chilean architecture scene kept being the same. This image is the cover of the New York Times Style magazine in March 2019. In its cover, a house by Cecilia Puga near Los Vilos, a small seaside town north of my hometown. The magazine featured the same architects as before, with buildings and houses against impossible landscapes, design decisions guided by an apolitical landscape, mute nature where nothing happens. So upon my return, I decided to start an office called Ahora. With a longtime colleague and friend, Claudio Astudillo, we look at extraction economies with particular attention to the ones that take place in Chile. And we ask what will happen after it's all gone. To realize possible futures led by local communities, we must understand the transformed landscapes inherited by our current economic values through the lens of what was and what could be. We do this by looking at documents that enclose most of our knowledge about our territories, the environmental impact assessments, which I'll discuss in depth later. We take on new mediums of representation to visualize and discuss the impacts of extractions with local organizations and academia. And in close collaboration with designers, biologists, and engineers, we draw the story of a place through its human and non-human inhabitants, relationships to challenge and propose new ways of being together. So for a bit of context, I believe some of you might be from Latin America. I'm not sure if there's any Chilean in the room or in the chat, but Chile is dotted by world-renowned architecture as much as is filled with socio-environmental conflicts. And in many cases, in the same area, architecture and socio-environmental conflicts sometimes share the same space. This is a map by the Institute of Human Rights with 132 socio-environmental conflicts, with 74 still active. Many of these conflicts have to do with the economic matrix of the country, the extraction of raw materials. In Chile, under the law that regulates the environment, a global environmental protocol known as the Environmental Impact Assessments are mandatory for anyone requesting to conduct any activity with a significant impact in the environment. These reports are made available online to anyone via the Environmental Evaluation Service website, which is the one that you're seeing on the screen. This platform is an exceptional case in Latin America where all the records, all the archives, all the filings are available and downloadable. I was recently in Costa Rica trying to understand, for a different reason, obviously, but to run a workshop. But I did a little research for their environmental impact assessment systems, and it differed from the Chilean situation in the sense that you could consult records, but you have to request them, and then it would be sent to you, but in a very not straightforward way. The platform didn't work very well. In Chile, you can access any project submitted to evaluation and download everything from the report, images, CAD files, shape files, everything that a consultant does for a company to evaluate the impact they'll have in the environment. which is proprietary information up to the point when it gets filed through the system. So for a country that's like Chile that has not invested in knowledge production about its own territory since the dictatorship, the best repository to consult for landscape transformations becomes this environmental evaluation service for designers, I mean. So at the beginning, Claudio and I began to be interested in one case study, which is a copper mine near Los Vilos, the town where Cecilia Puga's inverted house, like the one of the cover of the magazine, is located. And all the territorial transformations at each of its operational sites. From right to left, it's the open pit, the tailing dam Quillayes, tailing dam El Mauro, and on the coast, right next to Los Vilos, which is where you see Puerto Chungo, there's the tailing dam, and then in Puerto Chungo, it's port facilities and the right area, highlighted area, which is a eucalyptus plantation grown with the water from copper concentrate. This whole process is quite visible at the sites I've just mentioned, the ones I just shown you, but the extractive machine is everywhere. It's present at pipelines that zigzag across towns, a large conveyor belt at the beach, running beneath sidewalks, etc. It's everywhere. And at large sites like El Mauro, this tailing dam that displaced communities and buried indigenous petroglyphs 20 years ago will remain long after the mine is gone. This is truly a testimony to our new geological epoch, a new landscape for future generations. The mine is set to close in 2035, but sites like the tailings and the pit will remain for years, decades, and centuries to come. This other place, if El Mauro, it's a landscape for future generations. This is a landscape for generations right now. This is how the evapotranspiration zone looks like. Its purpose is to bioaccumulate the sulfates present in residual water from the industrial process necessary to separate copper from ore. A co-opted nature-based solution that allows the mine to get rid of tons of water, for it cannot be returned to a natural occurring body. And when I say that this is a landscape for generations right now, is because these are the neighbors to the plantation, an informal housing settlement of 400 families that since 2021 have gone into the plantation for wood to burn for heating purposes, releasing all the elements the trunks of those trees have bioaccumulated for 2 decades. And sometimes, despite all the design and planning, accidents happen. This is a prevalent discourse from the mind that everything is under control, everything has been well thought of. Engineering, this is the top of the line engineering. And despite all this design and planning, as I said, accidents happen. On the morning of August 15, 2022, Playa Amarilla, a beach right in front of Ramsar protected wetland Laguna Conchalí, became the site of a stranded jackup platform installed for the execution of the maritime works necessary for the final positioning of the seawater intake and brine discharge pipelines in Los Vilos Bay. These pipes belong to the offshore works of a desalination plant located in Puerto Chungo, a port that Minera Los Pelambres uses to ship copper concentrate out of coastal town of Los Vilos in the region of Coquimbo. There's a video here, which is loading there. The jackup platform, sometimes referred to as the Widowmaker, sits on the beach like a defeated, tilted 4 stories Leviathan. Tons of debris reach the beach, which port workers swiftly cleaned up. Though the most crucial part of the machine wreckage, 180 meters tall crane, and containers with almost 1,000 liters of diesel, along with 400 liters of vegetable oil, remain out of sight. The video has no audio though. These containers sit on the seafloor under the blankets of tides, hiding the disaster from the prying eyes of locals that took to the beach to see such a spectacle. The sight of the stranded desalination jackup platform reminded everyone that the crane had also fallen before, but had made less of an impact since it never reached the shore. So this mine and all the situations and landscapes shaped by it are the subject of exhibitions and writings we do at Aura. This image is from an installation at the Driving the Human Festival in Berlin in 2021, where we developed 3 speculations about future economies related to the environmental liabilities, or environmental heritage, it's sometimes translated to, from the mine's extractive activities. So I'll leave you with a little video. These are the 3 stories, speculations that we developed for that exhibition, which somehow looked like, we developed like 3 tables. It was like an archaeological findings of the future with items that this economy is deployed over time to work these landscapes. And accompanying those 3 tables were 3 videos that I'm going to show you guys now. This has subtitles, so if you cannot hear the audio, it's fine. Well, actually, it would be great if you could hear the audio though. Can you tell me if you can hear I'm gonna, where is this thing? Can you hear this audio? Well, the first part didn't
First was the construction of...
Perfect, okay, so I'm gonna rewind it. It's just a 5-minute video.
The sea was the first to feel the changes, even before mining began in early 2000. First was the construction of Porto Chungo, the conveyor belt, the huge shed and its buzzing. Then it was the traffic of huge vessels, and the cloud of copper concentrate dust that hung in the air as they loaded. Then it was the desalination plant, its construction, and the brine that began to chase the life out of the water. There was nothing left to fish. Only a few saw it coming. The propagators warned us about this. They were the ones who started all these transformations, even before the mine closed. They were already working on repopulating the bottom of the sea with those species that gave us economic sustenance, that helped us to put a roof over our heads. Before, nobody thought about the seaweed. Everybody was more concerned about the abalones and sea urchins, because they were more expensive. But we later understood that if the seaweed died, then everything would die. We thought these trees were beautiful at first. Although we were not allowed to visit them, we considered the eucalyptus plantation a forest that made our landscape more attractive. Then we realized that this is not a forest. It only looks like one. When the mine left, the eucalyptus trees began to dry up because, there was no more water from the copper concentrate to give them to drink. Without fences or surveillance, we began to enter the evapotranspiration zone, to remove little by little those trees that had fallen and cut those that were still standing because their roots began to reach the aquifer. It is not good to cut down trees, but these were hurting us. We learned that their trunks and leaves accumulated metals for almost 40 years. Now we're transforming this poison plantation into work for our communities. This used to be a valley where we lived with 20 other families. Shepherds and orchard workers, we had everything we needed. Then the mine came and we had to leave. In 2037, when the mine began to close its operations according to the closure plan submitted to Sernahumin, we began to return little by little. Working with universities, we began to stabilize the top layer of Mauro and Quillayes, because the sediment is blown away by the wind, and that is bad. Then we started to encapsulate the sediment to remove the toxicity from the valley. This will take centuries. But it's a noble task that began with my parents, continues with me, and will be carried out by my children and grandchildren. We're from here, you see. We're custodians of this land.
Okay, so I can, there. So these three stories were worked with subject matter experts, and we like to think of them as science-based fictions instead of science fiction. They somehow convey what happens to these places which have the size of full landscapes, and nowhere in the mine closure plans it details what's going to happen to them. But you have to acknowledge that that's the new environments and ecologies that communities are going to inherit after the mine closes. So that's what's been driving all of our exhibition work with Claudio the last 2 to 3 years. And we've developed that case study through interviews. It's been shown like the complex situation with the eucalyptus trees. It's been shown at the Sao Paulo Architectural Biennial in 2022. We've written about this case of this magazine called Monumental Wastelands, which is edited by Deborah Lopez Lobato and Jadine Charbel, who teach at the Bartlett as well. And we've published the first story accounts of the workers of these landscapes at different, at this student journal for Australian University called Curb. And when you think, oh, well, this is within the realm of like, this is like artist stuff, nobody really pays any attention to this. We've also found ourselves invited to post-extractive conferences, like this one in San Juan, Argentina, in June 2023, last year. San Juan is a mining province in Argentina. It has not developed mining at the same scale as Chile because of the geographic concerns. To take copper or minerals out of the Argentinian Andes takes too much money because it has to go across La Pampa to reach the Atlantic. While if you extract the same deposit on the Chilean side, you are within the same day in ships transporting copper concentrate, for example, through the Pacific. So that narrowness, it's a competitive advantage for Chile to take whatever it mines from the Andes quickly through the Pacific. And at this conference, they were very interested in the perspective of an artist. They wanted ideas, they wanted a visuality of what would happen in their province once mining started taking off, because it was receiving a lot of government subsidies because they wanted to reactivate economy in that area. So speculations were for them instrumental in understanding what was to come. So as for the design disciplines, this was organized by the School of Architecture. And as well for legislators, we share 2 days. The conference lasted for 2 days, and we shared the stage with lawyers, with regulators, and we were the only architects. We were the only ones from the design disciplines summoned there, even though this was organized by the School of Architecture. But it was very interesting to see that the method of speculation and the idea of what this could look like and what frictions they need to be prepared for was very important to them. So it was like a good match between us and them. So that's the work I've been doing through my own practice. But alongside that practice, there's also the work I do as an academic at Universidad de las Américas, or the one I was doing prior to joining the CRA late last year in October. So at UTLA, I ran 3 design studios that somehow, I'm going to show you guys the results of 2 of the studios, which also, like through those studios, I also worked these concerns about environment, like the climate crisis. How does the design disciplines relate to these types of situations, and how, as designers, we can work through those subjects. So one of the studios was actually called Landscape Ledgers, which is the name I gave my research proposal at the center. And Landscape Ledgers requested from students to pick a socio-environmental conflict in the same area where a noted case of Chilean architecture also happened, and that had and that you can get, for which you had a lot of press documentations. So this is the work of one student. This is the work of Cristian Araneda. He chose a socio-environmental conflict happening in Lake Panguipulli in the south of Chile, which is the lake in the middle that you can see here in the image. At this lake, what's happening is that there is like raw sewage discharge happening at the lake because of unregulated urban, like the city is getting bigger, the sewage system cannot cope, and it happens that they're dumping raw sewage into the lake. And 700 meters where this little plume of raw sewage happens, like at the top of the image, there was, and it was built, there was this proposal for a theater. This theater promoted images like this. These renders were the renders for the project that got the project selected, and that made the project win the competition for the architects win the competition for the construction of this theater. And I've always been very conflicted with these types of images because they depict like this over-the-top social capital that architecture will bring to the place just because you build something. And obviously it uses images like this, but in reality, it actually, if you can see the relationship to the edge of the river, in reality, it's absolutely fenced off from the edge. It's very difficult to access from the beach of the river. And yeah, it's absolutely fenced. There's public programming there. I mean, it works as a theater, but it does not do at all what these images somehow convey, like this absolute crazy cultural capital where there's no public and private spaces. Everything is like a gradient and everything is like happening, and it's super nice. And what it's most like the greatest contradictions come from the abstract of the proposal. This is written in Spanish. I'll translate on the fly. This says the theater like founds a new context, a new soil that situates the quietness of the territory. It talks about how quiet the riverside, the lakeside is, and that this work of architecture is going to bring measure, a new dimension that's recognizable to the edge of the lake. So somehow it talks about the landscape in a very, again, apolitical way, but it's kind of contradictory because 700 meters to the right of the proposal, there is raw sewage being dumped on the lake, but somehow that doesn't make it into the abstract for the proposal. So students were collecting the abstracts for the proposal, images, or like the renderings for the competition. At the same time, they were looking at the contents of the environmental impact assessment for a sewage treatment plant that's on the works to treat the raw sewage, as a way of accessing materials to understand how to understand the situation of the raw sewage being discharged and how the treatment plant was gonna like change that situation and change what's happening at the lake. So they were going through these reports and criticizing the ways that it sends the body of water, how it collected images from the environment like flora and fauna, and understanding that those things were just items and they were not understood through the relationships they established between items. So by going through the reports, students were selecting the different human and non-human actors that were summoned by this whole situation, bringing this like understanding of the issue through collage. And eventually they started developing little assets to bring to a 3D scene based on video game engines. They somehow did a video game to depict the contradictions of the architectural Chilean discourse with and like in the same space deploying all of the situations and people and non-human actors that the issue of the raw sewage was summoning on the same place. So this is another video. It has audio, but it's just too loud. So I'm just gonna like take the volume off. So students were thinking through real-time modeling software like this they did in Unity. So by going through the reports, getting, for example, that's like you see the number 2, that's like that station, that's the raw sewage treatment plant, and they model that after the blueprints inside the environmental impact assessment reports. And then they model a bit of the city with all of the trucks, the same amount of trucks that the environmental impact assessment said were going to be used while building the raw sewage treatment plant. And for example, I'm gonna like just move forward a bit. They brought into the scene the same species of mammal that was going to have their habitat disrupted because of the construction of the raw sewage treatment plant, and obviously also disrupted because of the construction of the theater building on the lakeside. They somehow also modeled the pipeline and the raw sewage being dumped. I mean, I'm saying this is the work of one student in one semester. And then the part that I was more interested in as someone who's like making them think critically is that they model the theater. He modeled the theater, Christian modeled the theater, and at the same time brought all of the images and the visuals present in the rendering for the project to showcase how absurd sometimes are the images that we create to communicate what we're trying to do, and the distance that exists between what the architects think their project is doing and what's actually happening on ground through the environmental conflicts that we can see and learn about through environmental impact assessment reports. So this was also an exercise. This was a design studio, but it was like more research based. And this was an exercise for a non-traditional research output. A scene, a video game scene that the people present at the crit or at the final show could navigate so they could understand the discrepancies and the conflicts between what we do as architects and what's happening on the ground. But there's also like a little like hint of like all of the bibliography that the students consulted is embedded within the scene. So they play on traditional research outputs and non-conventional, non-traditional research outputs. And the interesting thing is that obviously the kids are not, they're studying architecture. They have their way with software. So, I mean, they can learn Unity within one semester and pull a scene like this, which is also tailored to look exactly like Lake Pagipuyi. The footprint of the lake is the same as the real lake because they worked with satellite images to make the topography, bring it to Unity. So it's like a digital craftsmanship, like very well thought out. But the thing is that they're not video game designers. So the games have glitches, the games have edges. You can fall off this world. And that actually makes it interesting when you're navigating this whole situation. And that was one of the most outstanding works for landscape ledgers. And now I'm going to show you works for another design studio, which I taught along with Deora Lopez, Jarin Charbel, Serena D'Ambrosio, Nicolás Díaz, and Jaime San Martín. It was called Alternative Endings, Finales Alternativos. In Alternative Endings, we had a lot of students. I think we had 8 sets of like groups, 8 pairs to work through different concepts that engage with a future that took into account climate projections. So I'm going to show you the work of a team composed again by Cristian Araneda, Pamela Bustamante, and Catherine Medina. The 3 of them worked to offer a visuality, to offer a visuals for what could have been the Office for the Defense of Nature. The Office for the Defense of Nature, was an office proposed in the first proposal for the Chilean constitutional referendum in 2022. Chapter 3, the chapter of the environment, mentioned this office as an office to advocate for the rights of nature and the rights for future generations. And that office would have advocated, because the referendum, that first proposal was rejected. That office could have meant citizen participation, engagement, education, but nobody really knew what that office could look like. Was this office like an office? I go to an office and I like submit a complaint, or is it more complex than that? So the students' task was to imagine what that office could have meant and what could have looked like. So I'm going to show you the video that they did. I'm going to talk over the video because it's all in Spanish. And
Estos derechos quedaron definidos en el capítulo 3
even though it has subtitles, I'm gonna fully like take the volume off. Everything's in Spanish. So what they did is like they took Article 148, Defensoría de la Naturaleza, the Office for the Defense of Nature, and then they started thinking what it could look like. And they started from the case of they used as a case study the situation at the Andes with a glacier and mine operations that are affecting the glacier and also the water reservoirs for the whole of Santiago. So this started like this whole thing with an image from outer space that the defense of nature was going to start at that level with satellite monitoring of underground water levels. And the whole story is told through the perspective of a water droplet. So throughout, you follow the journey of a water droplet from the Andes, from the Olivares Beta Glacier and Juncal Sur Glacier, all the way to the Pacific Ocean. And through its journey, the Nature's Office, which is actually, it takes the size of a whole watershed, alerts systems to let the public know that the watershed is like the water table or the water, the groundwater is very low, or like the body of water is being compromised. So it takes you through the glaciers and like the Andes. Then it goes through the situation at the valley level in Laguna Culeo, where the water from the lagoon is almost missing. And then it goes through a wetland, an estuary on the Pacific, which the conflict there is that water comes with a lot of runoff from upstream activities. So they imagine this whole landscape filled with like totems that would alert when groundwater was like too low. And every time there has like, if it's too low, then in city centers like Santiago, there would be an image, like a signal that would let people know that the water rights are being are being like that we're doing something to the water, that we are not respecting water rights. I'm sorry. So yeah, the students were tasked with that. This series is called Crisis Design and Criticality, Thinking Frictions and Ecologies. So my own work has been about thinking about frictions and like future frictions through my own work, and as well as having students think about these frictions and their role as designers in like this new arena that they're facing. So I think that's a lot. I've taken enough time to show my work and the students' work. I think I'll leave it at that. And I'll take any questions you guys have after Amani's or now, I'm not sure. Yeah.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you very much. My suggestion is to hold the question for a second so we have a much fluid discussion. There's been a lot. So maybe the suggestion is, Amani, can you go share your screen, do your talk, and then we'll take it from there. So write down the questions or the comments, and then we'll come back later. Amani, off to you.
Yes, hi, just let me share my screen.
Sure.
Can you see it now?
Yes, coming.
Do you see it in shared? Yes, okay. So yes, first, thank you, Linda. That was really interesting. And now I'm going to go into a completely different geography and completely different way of practicing. So just a bit starting from where I am, how did I end up here? So first, I'm an architect, started practicing around 2013, 2014. And since then, I was a bit engaged with Architecture Without Borders International, which is a grassroots organization that has chapters around the world, work with on community-based architecture in parallel of my practice as a private sector architect. Now, in 2017, I made the shift and I joined international organizations. And since then, I worked in Jordan, Iraq, Yemen, Syria, and Ukraine. And my bud year was 2018, 2019. What I would say will be slightly different now in this talk is that my practice mainly or current approach to this talk or to what I am basically doing is that within the system of international cooperation, I try to look for the fractions of trying to push things into the localization approach and into more suitable solutions for communities that I work with. There are so many debates about international cooperation work in the Middle East, especially right now or even before. We're not strangers to the fact that this particular sector where we work in has a lot of or receive a lot of criticism that most of the time could actually deserve. So just not to take much longer on this part, I'm going to present a bit of work on that I've done in Jordan, and starting from the first project. The first one, so just to briefly starting on this one. So this project was, and also I need to explain that in all of these projects, I am part of a bigger organization. And the whole point is that we are seeing how logical frameworks are being put together and how we can find ways to maneuver around them and to not to sugarcoat things in a way. So the first one was a response to Syrian crisis in Jordan, and the response was based on cash for work modality. And it is a modality where you bring unskilled laborers who can do some infrastructural work, and they receive very small amount of money. This modality is very famous in emergency setting and in crisis setting and all of these things. However, when I started working on this project, we thought about it differently because we are trying to understand majority of Syrian refugees lives in urban areas and in rural areas across the country. So started with this, I would call it a pilot in 2018, actually. Um, um, a pilot to transform the cash for work modality into a more community-based urban development approach or community-based approaches to achieve social cohesion, to achieve other aspects of the that are needed for the community. Starting with the first one, so it's not a small intervention. We're talking about all across the country. The project's still going till today, and I'm just going to walk you through the process of how we managed to change all the implementation methodology of this project throughout the years that impacted a lot of locations. So our focus on urban and rural public space all around the country. The whole idea that we started to build around it when I first joined was to understand, to take it from this very rigid emergency response into something that is more based on the community. So we started with doing a lot of our own research and understanding of the communities that we are working with, start to do all the co-design workshops with the communities, host communities and refugees, And then with the process of hiring people to do the work, and then working with the communities to on collective action to make the space livable and take care of it, and then work a lot on social cohesion between Jordanians and Syrians, and also the durability of the implementation. I'll start with the first case. So I don't know if you are familiar with the geography in Jordan, but this is a village that is near Wadi Rum. I don't know if you watched The Martian. It's where they shot that movie. It's basically like desert. In this desert, the temperature gets between 45 to 49 degrees. There are huge impact of the temperature because the river, sometimes flash floods, and also we have very weak infrastructure in this village. And also in some locations, these villages are a bit overlooked sometimes. Now, in this village, there are the community itself is a bit as well. So it's a tribal structure, and there is a need for some leisure spaces, and there is a need to improve the green infrastructure to improve the microclimate for people. Now, I'm not saying that that was the ultimate solution for this particular space because there are so many layers of crisis that are hitting these people and accumulating on their everyday life. But that our main focus was on the green infrastructure in that particular project. Later, so when we started working on this project, we had a few issues, lack of women engagement, tribal structure, and all of these challenges. And so the whole aim was to involve women in finding these solutions and finding what is the best approaches for them to engage in this project. Over a few months, also engaged men in the same process, and in order for us to all come up with the designs and solutions for the public space, like the roads and the public parks in the area. After that, we started experimenting with the local community on the the material that we are trying to use. So experimenting with the clay and to produce bricks. This one is a very famous Bedouin way of making the shading elements for the Bedouin tents. So older women were the ones who are supporting us and teaching us actually how to do it. It's not a complicated process. It requires some understanding, and in these processes, this is where we actually managed to engage Syrians and Jordanians and in the social cohesion activities, and also in these ones. A while after, also with I want just to touch on the one particular thing that I always in my practice find it a bit challenging is how, as long as we are working in international cooperation, we always have very bureaucratic set of rules and very bureaucratic set of templates to fill and checkboxes and all of these things. And one of the things that we actually in this project that we pushed for throughout the years, actually from the first year, is that the selection of people who are participating in these projects to be based on the social structure of the community. So, and this one was a bit of work, because if we are working with tribal communities, well, the structure is different than what would be brought or applied in an urban area. That work continues, and the work continued, and this park was opened, and this is the park in its first or second year's anniversary. Just briefly about this particular experience. This park is the first women-only park in Jordan, because after working with women in this society, and after all the participatory processes, it was also noticed that, and also we know that women are more vulnerable to climate and more vulnerable to be outside And especially in this particular case is that women don't have any place to be outside in summer or winter in this village. And also some of them are veiled completely. So for them, after consensus within the society, it was turned into women only space. And I'm telling you, we did not impose it. It was really incredible how women actually convinced men that they have all the desert to go and roam around and they can have that space for them. Luckily, also women are very good at keeping microclimate prospering. This is also another park with the same approach. In another community nearby, we applied the same process, a high engagement with the society, using local methods to implement, and trying to work on a smaller level, small like fraction of improving the microclimate in these very challenging locations and in the context where we are working. Same with that. Also, we started after year, we started experimenting with even more processes and more more business related skills that could support communities in these locations to continue later on with the practices and the work that they've learned throughout these processes. So this was the first two are very similar. The third one is in Fifa village. Is now we're moving to the Jordan Valley. In Fifa village, we did not have any public space. The idea was to work on the pedestrian networks in the small village. And the whole idea was in that project we were working with the community on eco village. So FIFA is part of a FIFA eco reserve, it is a natural reserve in Jordan. And we were working with the National Society for the Conservation of Nature, and we are working with the local community and to gradually turn it into an eco village. The program was also connected between the public space in the area, safe spaces for children to play, and also on the other hand, we have the agricultural practices and working a lot with farmers on the native plants and agricultural practices and improving the production in the area. The component that we were working with was basically the discussion with the local community on these interventions. So and in these societies, what also is important is to take into consideration the local norms in terms of where people would like to have engagement and all of these things. So in this picture, you can see some of the outcomes of the 3 days open days consultation sessions with the communities. We had around more than 350 people just passing, coming, telling us, and all of these things. It was a festival, I would say. So with that, we created the master plan, and this is what we basically do in these sessions: is that we create the master plan. So where is the location? What is the intervention? And all the construction or implementation details based on the local knowledge and what is happening in all of these things. At the same time, we also identify what are the other intersectorial issues that are facing the community, because we are working within a bigger project that is interconnected, and others can jump in and support in other locations where we need to support. Same with also youth engagement, because these are the people who you want them to take care of the space intervention and continue the continuation of the public space and have it more inclusive for everybody. Later, also in all of these projects, we have so these are the interventions, I would say, till end of 2020, and then the further we pushed to have girls only public space within the public space. youth-only public space within the public space. Eventually, we managed to work around 12 locations around the country, all managed in the same situation, in the same sequence of things. This mural was also completely done by girls. And then in urban areas, so in rural areas, we always work and I like working in rural areas a lot with the existing social structure and social network, and because this is what make the project more continuous and make the impact bigger on the ground. In urban areas, it's a bit more complex because the social fabric is completely different. So when we are talking about durability, sustainability, and engagement of local community in public space, and this is where we actually witnessed all the social conflict between refugees and host communities. We see it on the playground. As much as we've done social cohesion assessments, we're talking to the adults and stuff like that, but now we follow the children to understand the fractions within the society. So it requires a different approach. And the different approach was, of course, starting with the needs assessment, participatory processes, implementation, and all the social cohesion activities. And I don't like to call them that. It comes naturally after a while of the intervention. But one of the things that we worked on a lot in these urban areas are space management committees, the committees that are coming from the process of the and developing the space, and they are taking a lead into organizing it and supporting the way forward and maintenance and all of these things along with the municipalities. So that happened in all urban areas where we intervened in Amman and in Zarqa, so 2 cities as well in Jordan. The Space Management Committee also defines they should not work in vacuum. So, and this is also extremely important to ensure the continuation of the project, was to define exactly what is the role of the municipalities with the space management committees, just to coordinate between both how it is being done and so on. Yes, so just to conclude on this intervention, what we've seen throughout the years, and this is also one of the things that since the project started in 2017 or 18 until today, it shifted completely into community-based approaches and towards improving the microclimate, agriculture, and also like these are the interventions I presented today are the only are the ones in settlements, yes, rural and urban. But we also did the same in natural reserves with local with indigenous communities there on the natural resources and other stuff. So it is it moved into that direction. I'm gonna move a bit to another experience that unfortunately I did not manage to go on the ground, but managed to do some work from Jordan. On Yemen, it's a very big portfolio, and maybe my role was a bit different in this one. However, I just will mention one type of work that was there was the work with women-led civil society organizations on a few very important topics. First, water-based conflict resolution action, and that was incredibly done by women in Yemen and especially in Ma'rib and Hudaydah and other locations in the north and in the south. And I don't know how familiar you are with the context of Yemen, but working with women-led civil society, the word women-led civil societies in the de facto authority in the north of Yemen is problematic. And working with them, providing the protection. And that is another form of work. Now, the participation is completely different, or the practice is completely different in this case. at that time, I was working with a donor agency, and all of our work was to reach out to women-led civil society organizations and to see how to work together on the ground and what kind of support that they need. We know that one of the biggest issues that hinder civil society organization from operating in a fragile context, similar like as Yemen, is access to finance and access to resources and access to protection as well, and technical support. And this is what I was working on with them. We worked on other projects related to infrastructure and so on, especially with the flash floods. And we had also worked together with FAO. Yes, it was FAO on early warning systems. These are standards project. I wouldn't really look into them. They are important for the crisis discussion. However, it's I would focus more on the women-led interventions. And one of my favorite interventions was disarming young men. It was done by an old lady. She was almost 68 years old, and she managed to collect the community and disarm men and to push them to go to work on agriculture and digging wells with the others. So that was an amazing thing to witness. The third one, so this one is another completely different view on things. Now, this one was my latest work in Iraq. So the assignment was to look into ways of supporting the Iraqi government and one particular ministry to understand how to develop the market system in the southern region of Iraq. Now, just to give a brief of the context that we are working with. So Iraq has been going through a series of crises since the 80s with the Iran-Iraq war, embargo in the 90s, and then the American invasion in 2003. And then ISIS, and then it's continuous and it continues. And when we are looking at, so this project or the organization or the body that I was working in, we represent an entity that provide analytical understanding of the data that we look at, and we provide policy advices to decision makers and to implementing partners on the ground and all of these things. So our role basically is to find ways to understand the reality on the ground through the data and through digitalization and through these tools. So first, when we were commissioned to do this project, we were asked to manage the data and to look into how to conduct these analysis and all of these things. And then this is where it became interesting for us, is to see how we can actually push a little bit more and to create something different or something else. So the question that I've asked myself, I think in early 2022, was how would we design a virtual space of engagement that responds to the needs of the state, private sector, training centers, people, chamber of commerce, taking into consideration all the poverty pockets, employment requirements, and what are the issues that are hindering development in the southern region of Iraq, and also it's all of Iraq. Our main focus was starting in the south, and now it's mainstreamed in Iraq. And there it started a very long process of co-designing this system with all these stakeholders. It was a process of over 15 months of the co-design. And it is, I know we are talking about urban design in this call, and we're talking about a climate crisis. And I will tell you why this is in the heart of all of this. It's so designing. So first, I would go back to a lot of things that we were working on in Iraq. So this one was one fragment of a bigger network of analysis that we were also running at the same time. And all of the other analyses are merely based on data, on satellite data. So we are looking at crossing the agriculture with mines. in Iraq, there are so many issues related to mines, explosive mines that are hindering the development of agricultural lands. We were looking at the water scarcity in the area, climate and health, and now we are looking at this component. And this is the component that we've seen that it is the one that requires a lot of engagement between different actors for several reasons. One, the private sector engagement in Iraq is extremely weak. However, it is extremely important for the development of the country moving forward. And the economic crises are one of the biggest in the country. That's one. And two, Iraqis depend a lot on being able to provide for themselves the means to sustain their resilience to climate crisis. So an average Iraqi would be paying for a generator monthly, would be paying for water filters also monthly, and we are talking about a lot of constraints in the crisis of the climate crisis are putting on the shoulders of the population. Another thing is that due to the severity of the economic crisis and the market system development, we have witnessed the massive protests in 2019 that cost 1,100 lives in Iraq. So it was the moment to start the conversation to move forward. At the same time, we were focusing on locations where the economy is merely, or the whole development of the whole city is merely depending on oil and gas. And oil and gas sector is not really supporting Iraqis. I'm not saying that it's not supporting Iraqis. I'm saying that many of the the marginalized groups in Iraq or the average Iraqis are not really benefiting a lot from the oil and gas, and that is also another conversation. So in this work, we have developed eventually, after almost 1 year, 15 months, we have developed this virtual space of engagement, and I would say that it was a very long process that we had to engage with endless actors to achieve. And then we started testing the project and going back for more feedback and so on. Just this a small thing about this process, and the whole space of participatory engagement has changed completely from the first example. But one of the things that we have managed to do in this system is that we have reflected the participatory processes of analyzing data and connecting it with the multi-scalar connection and the multi-sectorial connection of the needs, of the requirements, of what are the things that are happening on the ground. We've managed to completely customize this process that we've designed with the actors into the system that operates and provide further information on the market system. The market system merely depending on the supply and demand and the policies and the environment and all of the stuff that are hindering the development of these processes. As also part of this, so this is the system. It is in Arabic. It's up and running, and eventually it was adopted by the government of Iraq, Council of the Ministers, and it is operating. Yeah, and then moving on. One of the things that we've done as part of this project was to look into agriculture interventions in Basra, and it was one of the areas of focus because so Basra is one of the biggest oil producers in the world as a city. It's in the southern region of Iraq. City was, I think, I got the picture. Yes, so you can see here the city was severely contaminated. This is a work done by us also at another department. So you can see Basra is severely contaminated as well. So the explosive mines contamination impacts the agricultural practices. However, let's go back to crisis in Basra. what we've done is that we joined the efforts of this system plus all the other information that we've done as like researchers with the pre-identified people who received support to um, to work on their agricultural lands. And what we have seen, and maybe is, so in Basra, the situation of the the accumulation of the crisis are so severe. Like you can see, Basra is thirsty. It's due to the low level of the Euphrates River that is highly affected or impacted by the drought, climate change, water diplomacy, the amount of water that is entering Iraq from neighboring countries, and also the contamination from the urban and from the oil and gas sector. What did that lead to? It led to a vicious cycle of overuse of water to land wash the soil, to prepare it for agricultural production, to increase the salinity of water, again with the soil, and it is a vicious cycle that goes on and on and on. And these are the things that we have managed to, let's say, negotiate and put on the table with the designated ministries. And one of the outcomes of this project is that there was a bit of change in policies in supporting in the regulations of loans, micro loans to support these small businesses on the ground. Maybe there is a lot of debate around this, but also like after these years of working in these communities, economic stability is key to develop the urban living. And this is what we were trying to push in into this. Of course, there is the advocacy and the multiple levels of the crisis. And this is also one thing that I keep thinking of in this one, is that the whole concept of crisis and what we are working on, we're working on a small fragment, and it is part of a very big system of these crises. In Basra, we worked on the information. We worked on a smart system that could give us all the data. We worked with the farmers to understand what are their pains, and we spoke a lot about it, and also even partnered with other entities who would support with the best approaches to support these farmers to retrieve or support their lands. However, it also requires some further thinking of the level of impact that we are leaving. And this is something maybe for you as practitioners who are now thinking about all the stuff that we learned in BUD and then moving to work. If you choose to work in this through the international cooperation or any other system, it is like the question remains: is it a band-aid on a very open, very big open bleeding wound, or is it actually a way to support micro solutions for a very big crisis? And this is a question that remains. I'm not. I will not discuss Ukraine a lot at the moment. I've been working there for a few months now, and it is pure emergency. But I want to pause for a minute and just reflect on the last part of my presentation. Is it a very small band-aid on a very big wound? To be fair, at this stage, I am very troubled about this particular point because of the multiple realities that we are living now in this world. It's a bit schizophrenic. I am from the Middle East. I am in Jordan, and we can actually see what is happening now in Gaza, all the bombs, all of the attacks, and all of these things. And maybe the question that we would ask ourselves now, and these are the questions that we try to understand also when we are working in Basra with these farmers, is that when a farmer is asked to be more environmental friendly while seeing the oil and gas companies, this question is amplifying now when we're seeing all the emissions coming from the bombs, or all of these emissions that are indicating very clearly that there are communities to be sacrificed. So it is, yeah, I would like to take this conversation more towards this reflection on the practice and where do we stand, not to overlook all the micro support that is being provided for communities. However, the big picture or the big layers of crisis remains. And this is also another form of otherwise thinking. Yes, so I think that's all from my side. Over to you, Camilo.
Thank you very much, Mani. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Linda, again. Now, I would suggest you guys take the lead to ask any question, making any intervention. I think what we have kind of here is, and I'm not attempting it at all any synthesis of the work. I think what we have here is the opportunity to engage in a conversation, super free, with two friends and two colleagues that have been engaged with the questions that we are engaging with too, and attempting to find their own way to unground possible frictions, to hack different frictions, to actually think differently on different modalities of practice, but also different methodologies and ways to go about within different systems, within different regimes. So the only thing I can say is that there has been a plurality of different language and register across which both the critique is unfolding into the practice of design, but also the way in which reflectively, put it in this way, or intellectually or politically, a designer, an architect, a practitioner, a scholar is constantly questioning modalities of practice within a realm of intervention. And in a third, possibly, element of conversation in relation to climate crisis or environment or slash nature, because it was a terminology that you use very differently across the two different thoughts, is this idea of scale in time both in terms of the present and the condition, but also the different scalar implication, not necessarily micro and micro, but also the territorial and the temporal scalability of the intervention. So this was just to let you gear up a bit, so not an attempt to synthesize it. So the suggestion is that I have for you is that you guys in the room just come to close to the computer where you have the microphone and really pose any question, offer any comment. And my suggestion for Linda and Mani is maybe you take 2 or 3 comment and conversation, and then we'll jump into that as a forms of conversation, as a forms of building up. And you might want also to ask yourself a question if you want to allow me to do that. And I have some myself in the case. So Giovanna, I leave you the machine.
Yeah, so we take the question from the room first.
Absolutely.
So, guys, any question, comment, anything, reflection? Okay, so maybe you say your name.
Okay.
They can't see you though.
So we hear KT, but okay, you're good.
It's weird because you're saying, okay. So hi, my name is Ricardo. I'm a political scientist from Colombia, and I had a question for Linda. And I understand that this conference that you were invited to was in Argentina, I think you said, but I had the curiosity if Chile has answered to your practice as well. I mean, if your own country has found interest in these critiques you're doing about the industry that you find there, or if it's just international recognition. Because the reflection behind that would be I often see that practitioners get recognition and their work is relevant in other countries, but oftentimes the site where they are working about or the context where they are analyzing usually isn't that interested about their work. So I don't know if that happens to you as well, or
Yeah, definitely. I mean, actually, thank you for the question. Oh yeah, no, one or two or three.
Yeah, maybe let's see if there is any other, so we can.
Yes.
If not, we'll go one by one. Sorry. Any other?
Yes, there is another one.
Yes, please.
Thanks.
Sorry, Linda.
That's okay.
Hello, my name is Maria Jose. I'm from Lima, Peru. And my question is for Amani. I don't know, I mean, I'm a bit curious and I would like to know what is the process that you go through in order to work, for example, in the case of Ukraine, is it you and your team that approach to them or to certain organizations, or is it the other way around? Or what's the type of interaction that you, or the process that gets you to actually get the work done, or create this relationship with them? Thank you.
There is another question.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Hello?
They can't see you.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, they can. You can all go on a table and then they can be next to each other.
Yeah, they don't have to. There. No, you just go there. Oh, I don't know what I'm doing.
I think we said it the video so then they can see who's speaking.
Yeah. So you just.
Okay. My question was a continuation to what Maria Jose just said. I am curious in knowing from Amani how the finances of this operate and what are the major source of economic play that get these things to work. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Okay, let's go for this round of three and then we'll move forward. Okay, Linda, you want to start? Sorry.
Yes. To answer Ricardo, actually, I'm trying to think of the times I've presented my work in Chile, and it's no. Not Chile does it's not the architectural school community, like the academics have not been interested in the work, even though I've tried to socialize it quite a bit within academia in Chile. But no, we've gotten invitations to speak at Argentina and Germany, engagements like this, for example, but I must say I have not been invited. I mean, just once. We talked about our methods of science-based driven speculations. This engagement for this series of relating to pedagogy. But no, I mean, it's still architecture in Chile. It's a degree, it's a professional degree. Therefore, you are trained as an architect for 5 to 6 years. So it's not as for example, in other parts of in other architectural schools, you get your license after a certain amount of years after practicing. In Chile, you get it immediately after 6 years. So it's more professionally driven, practice driven. Therefore, these types of reflections and critiques fall within the radar of the scope of what are the usual topics of design schools, architectural schools. So yeah, recognition so far has come from other places, not necessarily from within Chile. I think that answers the question.
Thank you, Linda. Amani, you want to answer?
Yeah.
Come back to this idea of where critique is unfolding later on.
Okay, so the first question, how do we work in Ukraine? So I work within the international organizations, international non-for-profit organization system, and this is how we are trying to operate. So this is the way. In Ukraine, we are working basically with Ukrainian local NGOs. We are, I did not touch on that because there's still a lot to be figured out in Ukraine, so I don't want to misinterpret the situation. But at this stage, we are supporting some of our work is supporting civil society organizations to rebuild some of the locations. A lot of work is still on the repair work. So it's still, we did not get into the recovery, or I still did not get into the recovery work. Financing mechanisms, same. I mean, it depends on the entity that you are working with, but it's definitely none of the work that I've presented is voluntary based or civil society level based. Over.
Okay, sorry. Anyone else from the room? Sorry, and while I had to answer my doorbell. Okay. Anyone from the room? Oh, there is something in the chat. Okay. Needy, you have a question. You have a question in the chat. If you are there, you can maybe go and speak on the phone. If not,
Webinar.
okay.
I don't think you can. You have to read the question or.
Okay, I'm reading that out at loud. Needy, I'm an urban researcher practitioner from. Thank you for the presentation. I have a question for Linda. How do different stakeholders respond to the very powerful and evocative visualization? Could you share some example of how government policymakers or mining agency or any other stakeholder might have responded to the very evocative visualization and storytelling?
Yeah.
This was a question for Linda.
Yeah. So the time where we had, I mean, when we were in Germany, we had reactions from not local stakeholders or people engaged, I mean, people from Chile, but from all over. And this has happened to us working with like mining and also like researching about the impacts of desalination in like marine ecologies in the Pacific, for which there are not that many studies as there are for Middle Eastern countries that have dealt with desalination for a while now. Is that the storytelling and the visualizations somehow put on the table stuff that wasn't even on their radar, that like these are operations that are so complex and the ecologies that will emerge from these sites are so complex, and that all of the knowledge that so far we have right now about these ecologies are within scientific papers. But to translate the scientific paper to a compelling story that you can understand without having to sit down and read through an abstract and 20 pages of a paper is much more like easy and more digestible. So people are always very surprised that, oh, this is what this is about, or these are the implications of landscape operations at this scale. And what becomes very unsettling for many of the people that see our work is that many times they ask for, so what's a solution? As if what we're dealing with is a mathematical problem. And it's not. It's a situation where we're faced with a new condition and we need to learn how to engage with it and how to work through it and live through it. And I've seen that that's like a very like a point where many disciplines feel kind of frustrated by what we do, because they come to us for, okay, so what do we build to fix this? What's the solution? And it's so nerve-wracking because we cannot speak in terms of solutions ever, especially when we're like dealing with social spatial practices, which are forever unfolding and do not end at shading a space. They don't end at cleaning up something, because wherever we clean up, then we just take whatever toxic dump elsewhere. I mean, we like entropy. So yeah, I mean, I feel like that's overall what I've learned from engaging with different audiences that have taken to our work in a way of first being very, oh, I wasn't aware of this, and secondly, feeling very frustrated because they ask for answers when we cannot provide them with one.
Thank you. Nidi, you can type follow up in any case. Anyone else from the room? And Amani, whenever you want to jump into Linda's, whenever you want to jump on Amani's,
Yeah.
it's absolutely fine. Anyone else from the room?
Any other questions? Yes, Camilo.
Yeah. Take your time for the logistics to move to the mic. It's no problem.
Thanks very much. Hi, I'm Katie. I have a background in geography, but I, for the last 3 or 4 years, have been working in London with local authorities on projects to make it easier to walk and cycle. And my current work now is focused on working with residents in one borough to think about how we can adapt to climate change, which is obviously an enormous topic. And just based on what you were saying then, that really struck me, that like desire that so many people have, and I notice in myself, to ask, what's the solution? And yeah, that this isn't the kind of collective and multiple crises that we face is not a mathematical problem. And as you say, it's a new condition that we have to learn to live with. Obviously, the answer to this question is going to vary massively depending on location, geographies, politics, economics. But as practitioners, when we're kind of working in our various different places, what are some of the most important things that you think we need to be thinking of, whether it's values or principles or lenses or approaches, when we're thinking about how to adapt urban spaces to climate change, however it shows up in spaces? I know that's an enormous question, but any kind of immediate thoughts would be really interesting.
Linda, Mani, you want to go? Go.
So I think it's perhaps it's in the title of this lecture series, isn't it? Urban Design Otherwise. I think the most interesting, I mean, to work through that frustration is to come to terms with the need to see otherwise, to not expect solutions, because you know, when you expect a solution is so you can keep carrying the same course as you've done so far. And that's the most unsettling part of what's happening everywhere. May it be because of like migrant conflict and the issues that Amani deals with, or environmental legacies and impacts of extraction economies. Everything is changing at such a rapid pace and at such a great scale that to ask for solutions is definitely to remain within the same course, and we need to learn to be and see otherwise, so we can understand that we cannot keep carrying as we've done, and because that got us to this point. So yeah, I think the work that anyone engages with when working with communities or having like a one-on-one exchange with someone else that looks up to you as a designer for something, an answer, it's to help them work through that anxiety and realize that there's much opportunity on the other side. to be otherwise, to see otherwise, and engage otherwise with your environment. And I think, Amani, you probably are within that same vicinity, Adam.
Yeah, I just want to add about also, like, especially these crises are irreversible, so it's more about adaptability and being able to, of course, accept it and deal with it. I would think about, we need to work through what fascinates me a lot is the ways people try to adapt to what is going on, especially farmers, like they are incredible. But in many situations, what I think of is that it is still the question of enabling environments, cities as enabling environments, and this is how I would think about it. Cities are complex systems. These environments where we are living in are complex systems. If we are only thinking about creating an enabling environment for people to adapt to the already unreversible crisis that we are going through, I think this is the approach. And I would think of it definitely multiscalar, intersectorial. Doesn't work in one way or only in one fragment. Yeah, that's from me.
This is very interesting. Maybe why you keep in the room, if there is any other comments and answer. I'm intersecting with one question or comments across the two, which is here. Let's stay for a second on this realm of defining terms of the engagement within a reality that, or within a series of systems that are both complex, fast, in crisis, whose language is not even appropriate to a certain extent, or is require a constant change to define its own very same term to learn from. I was struck from one of the sentence that Linda, you said early at the beginning. I think speaking on the first work, and you said something like, and I'm quoting badly, landscape. You said landscape was first to feel the changes. You were speaking, and you use a sentence like that struck to my mind, because I think this is what is not only the otherwise here that is at play, but is a substantial methodological and political change. Is actually changing the subject of that equation that you were, or one element of that equation that you were both outlining very clearly. Solution on one side, very definition of a design that is very much a definition not only of a solution, but is a superimposition of a vision of the society, an interpretation of something, and actually its own, you use the word cultural capital, or solutions and systems in another way. And I wonder whether, if the landscape has to feel first, or if landscape is feeling first the change, what then are, methodologically speaking, the implication for designers, and ourselves to actually allow that mechanism, that feeling to emerge somehow? Prior to discussing idea of outcome, visions, visuality, digitality, or virtualisms to a certain extent, that was part of something that connect also your two components, especially in the Iraqi case, Amani, that you were saying, look, space that we are designing are actually systematic, is institutional, is organizational, is, otherwise to a certain extent of the very physical manifestation of a building. But my question is methodological for you, is what you think methodologically are the challenge of design to allow that landscape to speak first to a certain extent, to change the subject of the intervention. And I think this, and I'm closing, what I'm trying to say is that I agree with you that the issue here is not more crisis, nor crisis, even in the romanticization of, but it's actually the risk of romanticizing, even though a change of a due of basically is doing something differently only by changing the language that describe what you do, right, rather than methodologically. So my question is methodological somehow, is what you think are the challenge methodologically in what you do. And of course, this idea of a much, I'm critical about this idea of adaptation, because for example, one point that I'm trying to make about adaptation is where the politics on that. And politics, I mean, what are actually those principles, if you want, however you grab them. And there is no the risk that adaptation become the new resilient mechanisms, if you want. So just let it go. And therefore, what are the different cosmologies that might be used in that? For me, goes back to the methodology point, which is more not only pedagogical but truly political. So is more a series of questions or preoccupation, not actually a direct question. So I'm curious you to unpack a little bit about methodologies yourself, and then we'll move maybe. Anyone?
Somebody, you want to go first?
I could try. It's a lot of
Okay.
questions all in one. But
Yalla.
you know, Camila, the first thing that came to my mind when you discussed the feel of the change in the landscape, and I thought about the word liberation.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first word that crossed my mind. And then I started to reflect on that. And this is also, and I am only speaking with a very huge bias of my region. So this is the base I am thinking of. The first thing that came to my mind is liberation and decolonization of the practice and the feeling of the victimization of people impacted by the crisis, and also their status as collateral damage of the crisis. Because also what we are seeing a lot that is happening is that due to and I agree with you, by the way, about the adaptation part and the let go part means that there are parts, huge parts, societies, maybe cities, are to be sacrificed, especially for the climate crisis. The first thing that came to my mind when you said about the landscape of feeling the change is the liberation. And liberation is both political and within the practice of putting, I don't want to say like priorities first. This is my first reflection. Methodologically, it requires a lot of engagement with communities impacted, and not to sugarcoat and never to romanticize their resilience, because they are not romantic about their resilience, because they are on fight or flight mode. So just say things the way they are. And we understand that most of the crises are extremely political and economic crises. They are the ones that are causing all of these environmental crises. It is political crisis. So we start with the political liberation and the intellectual and practical, methodological decolonization of the practice where we are working. Another form that we are seeing a lot in the Middle East is we need to also liberate ourselves from the green colonialism that we are facing at the moment. One of the things that we also should be careful about is what is the localized approach to either adapt or revolt against the climate change and all of these things. So not also to put all the weight on the word with all of these like advanced methodologies of adapting on these communities. This is my very quick just word vomit reflection based on the very long list of questions. But over to you, Linda, and maybe I'll jump in later.
Well, my reaction to that provocation would be, you said, okay, landscape was the first to feel the changes, yes. And then if landscape is feeling them first, what are the implications? Well, I would say that like one of my biggest criticisms for like Chilean architecture is that treats landscape as an apolitical subject. and you design a house to look at the view, to like, it's always a very visual relationship. And for the more advanced discourse, architectural discourse has to do with like the exchange of energy, like the heating, like passive heating, like but it's still devoid of a political discourse that actually has created the asymmetries that we see. So methodologically, I would imagine that for designers is to see the discipline and like to see their roles as designers, not as someone who can just beautifully draw floor plans and heat exchanges and passive heating techniques and stuff like that. Or ventilation for a house is understanding that nature is also a witness, and this is like the reflections of Susan Schuplis through material witness. If landscape is the first to feel the changes, there's so many records of environmental violence that we are not even able to see. Like, for example, I've tried to workshop these ideas through some design studios with students about why do we keep designing parks for contemplation, where we can be actively designing for monitoring degradation, and spaces for citizen science experiments or data collection or baselining practices. This is the work of Sebastián Ureta. Baselining is a very important component in environmental policy protocols, environmental impact assessments, because it's this thing you measure change against. So the baseline is a very important thing. But the thing is that there are no baselines. There's only baselining practices. Who gets to build the baseline holds much power. So what if, as designers, we turn public spaces places for measuring change, and we hand the public eventually the tools to monitor stuff and to understand that you can engage with the outside, not only as because the discourse now says it's a public mental health thing. You have to go outside because it's good for you. Yeah, sure, you can go outside and look at stuff and like be immersed in nature, but still a very passive and like apolitical way to relate to landscape. I mean, there's small, as like Amani, you were saying, it doesn't have to be like a huge revolution. It could start very small. And I think that like in Latin America, there's this thing with the otherwise. Well, the indigenous cosmologies, the whole work of Viveros de Castro to like unearth ways of engaging with the world that are not the predominant narrative. They're the decolonized narrative. And those ways of doing things have always been there. It's just that we are kind of like oblivious to acknowledge them for what they are. So for example, as like in part of your work, Amani, when you were like showcasing like the textile work, like the brickwork, like there's local economies that have engaged with the environment, and that somehow through their outputs, they are building baselines of environmental change. I mean, those bricks hold sediment that can hold many other stories within them. So to understand that there are records in everything, there is material evidence everywhere, and that nature is a material witness that can hold testimony, that's an evidence and at the same time can bear testimony. I think it's important, and that it's absolutely a different switch. It's not building to house the body, but perhaps designing to make a forum for the non-human to speak. Like the little exercise the student made with the Office for the Defense of Nature, for example.
Well, that was brilliant. Thank you very much.
I want to add one part that is also related to the landscape in its physical form as well. I also keep thinking about the global standards of climate response practices and everything that we are seeing about environmental friendly material recommendations and all of these things. And I also think about people who are struggling with food security. This is how I see it. And these are like two levels of discussion, and I would never put them in the same line. So something about feeling the landscape methodologically around you is also seeing the local production or the local sufficiency. This is the word, yes. الاكتفاء الذاتي. If somebody speaks Arabic, just jump in. It is something that I would also feel strongly about is this, because this is where we start, is to be like able to provide ourselves with what we eat.
Excellent, wonderful. We have very few moments, and I know the people in the room are tired, but I want to take the advantage of having you both here. I have a very quick question, or actually, I have a question or a point that I want you to answer very quickly, without even thinking too much. But there were two words that you use, both that fantastically, but in different. With different intentions, I think. And I want you to elaborate a little bit on that. We all agree that necessity of critique, and both of you are doing critique in a different, deploying it in a different manner. My question is, again, methodological, and with the use of word, Linda, you use speculations or speculative as an element or as a methodology or as an outcome of design through. And Amani, for you, design is very much a process oriented, kind of a fatigue within actors, places, scale, and outcome. Do you think, what is that then? Speculation and processes for and in coping with an untamable crisis, and you somehow witness or work with longitudinal, temporal, and spatial crises in a very different regional span. So the question that I have is speculation and process as a methodology for both of you, how much this is capable to deal with crises, where the limitations are, if any? And I know is not necessarily a question, but is a way to say, methodologically, the way you conceive design profoundly grounded into my interpretation of your understanding of design, how much actually, or how far can go in dealing with that? And I think with this kind of round, we'll maybe, thank you more formally, and we close. I know my role is putting wider things. Linda.
I think for me, the speculations, to put it like the way that me and Claudia and I as Linda with students and through my own work, it's like work with science-based speculations to cope with the uncertainty of what's going to happen, to like test out different ideas of what a future could look like. But at the same time, within the work of speculations, within using speculations to work through uncertainty, one of the caveats I've seen is that the many people request certainties, request answers. So, I mean, this is something that I'm formulating on the go, but it's interesting that I use speculations to work through uncertainty, but sometimes the speculations might fall and fall apart because they need as much certain facts to be plausible in order to be treated as plausible, and therefore to validate them. So I'm not sure if it's a contradiction. It's just a play on words, but the certainty of facts need to feed the speculations in order to think through uncertainty. And that feedback loop, it's somehow something that I've been struggling with, because it's very easy to talk through this feedback loop with designers, but when you engage with other professions, with stakeholders that come from different backgrounds,
the certainty, the facts aspect weighs heavily on them. And these issues are extremely complex. We do not know how they actually interact sometimes. I mean, we're just realizing the impacts of many of industries that took place like in the second half of the 20th century. And we're realizing that we were not even aware of impacts at scales that we didn't have the technology to sense, for example, the impacts of mining on the freshwater reservoirs in the Andes for like the glaciers. Santiago was like drying up because of mining upstream. So yeah, the different stakeholders take to facts differently and they request them in order to think through these uncertainties. But the thing is that you can only be promised uncertainty the same way you can only be promised change.
Thank you very much. Mani.
Well, Linda, that was interesting, actually. So processes, well, yes, you summarized it very well. I see everything. I see design as a process. And I also see that throughout this process, there are so many other elements that jump in and create hybrids to the process that takes another route and create its own process. And that is like you grow a network of interlinked processes that create change eventually. And this is why I like processes and I like to work in this setup. And I see it in a way forward. I'm convinced that even either adapt or revolt or build the resilience or solve or whatever we call to deal with the ongoing crisis is multi-scalar processes, and it is basically that. Work on it and make it hybrid and engaging with other processes, parallel or interconnected, and all of these things. So for me, yes, I see it as a very big, complex process, small and big, different scales. But I see the continuation of this, and I see it as a way forward. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So if there is no any intervention from the room, I'm happy to draw to a close and thanking you very much for sparing some times, very distant location. Giovanna.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And a clap from the room to you. Sorry for the technical issues at the beginning.
It's okay. Thanks. We had enough time to chat and to speculate about climate and weather in London. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Amani and Linda. Good luck for your work. And I'm sure we're going to come together in some other moment. And thank you very much for sharing your work, your passion, and engaging in a conversation, although a little break for the digital. But thank you very much. And for you guys, we'll see you next Friday with two other speakers, Matthew Carmona and Noddo, which is an organization, NGO from Colombia. So thank you very much, and have a good rest of the day. Muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Ciao.
Thank you.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.